Hello everybody and welcome to Thursday's edition of Video Clips. I have really disturbing information to share with you today, and every time I read this or refer back to it, it upsets me. You've heard me talk before about the USDA's industry-friendly stance and the extent to which it seems to be willing to help livestock producers. The dietary guidelines are developed in consideration of big agriculture. And the thing I'm going to talk about today is a USDA-supported effort that involves research on livestock, because the USDA wants to help livestock producers sell more of their product. I've always said we probably do need an advocacy organization for farmers and that sort of thing, but that these people shouldn't be involved in producing or developing dietary guidelines. But this information makes me think that this advocacy organization for farmers really needs to be done away with. All right, so as it pertains to the treatment of animals, I thought I had seen everything until I read a recent article in the New York Times. The U.S. Meat Animal Research Center in Nebraska is charged with conducting research on livestock, and the main reason, their main mission, is to improve profitability for the industry. The good news is that the intake of animal foods is going down in this country. The bad news is, to compensate for it, the industry is looking for ways to make more profit. The agency was organized by Congress 50 years ago. It's funded with taxpayer money, and its accomplishments have included things like producing bigger lamb chops, less fatty pork loins, and steaks that are easier to chew. And I don't know about you, but as a taxpayer, I'm a little irritated right now, but you'll get more irritated as I go on here. One strategy for increasing profitability is to increase the number of babies the animals have. For example, pigs will usually have 8 piglets, but are now birthing up to 14 at a time. Cows normally have 1 calf at a time, and instead are being bred to have twins and triplets. The newborns are too frail and weak to move. They're often deformed and die, and sometimes they're crushed when their mothers literally roll over. In one weekend during the birthing season, veterinarians report finding 25 animals in trouble. 5 had been attacked by coyotes. Many of them were hungry. They'd been abandoned by their mothers. They took the carcasses and just dumped them in an excavation pit. The Times reports that this has been going on. Animals have been subjected to pain and illness and premature death for the entire time that this agency or center has been in business. There are laws against some types of animal abuse, but there's an exemption for farm animals used in research to further agricultural science. Now, none of this to me seems like it furthers agricultural science. This exemption, combined with the fact that most people don't even know about the center's existence or activities, has allowed the abuse to continue almost without interference. The USDA is charged with supervising the center, but it doesn't actually engage in any real supervision, neglecting to even enforce its own rules regarding animal experimentation. In the absence of any type of regulation, the center has the dubious honor of being the go-to place for research that universities either can't do because of ethical concerns or refuse to do. A former veterinarian for the center says that even livestock producers would be appalled at what goes on there. A veterinarian by the name of James Keene approached the New York Times about the center, and that's what started the investigation. It resulted in interviewing lots of former employees and looking at thousands of records that were provided under the Freedom of Information Act. The findings are disturbing, and I'm summarizing here. The whole article was very, very long, and it was all just horrible. But leaner pigs developed by the center have so little body fat that 1 in 5 females can't reproduce. So they're doing surgery on their ovaries, surgeries on their brains, trying to keep pigs lean but have them reproduce at the same time. 6,500 animals have starved to death, and 625 have died from mastitis, which is a very treatable condition. The results of one breakthrough, if we can even call it that, achieved by the center, bigger litters for pigs, has resulted in almost 10 million piglets being crushed by their mothers each year. Now, the risk of crushing increases because there are just too many babies, and the mothers get bigger and bigger as they have bigger litters more often, which makes it more likely that they're capable of harming their own piglets. Sheep are the most mistreated. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of pressure to breed less expensive meat, because lamb consumption has gone down by about 80% in the last several years. One attempt to breed larger lambs involved injecting ewes with so much testosterone that their babies' genitals were deformed, making it difficult to urinate and causing thousands of deaths. Another innovation, if we can call it that, involves breeding sheep that don't need to be sheared. All their hair just falls out. One of the most egregious experiments involved trying to breed sheep so that lambs could survive on their own without human assistance. The problem was that not so many did. The ewes ignored their lambs. The researchers left them alone in the pastures to see how much distress the lambs would have to have before the ewes would respond, and the bottom line is they didn't. One person who was talking to the Times said that a lot of the lambs died. The rest were in terrible conditions since they'd been abandoned at birth, and they were easy prey for coyotes in severe weather. Even sheep growers have expressed concern about these types of practices. The researchers just don't seem bothered by the situation at all. In fact, this experiment is scheduled to continue for 4 more years. Some of the cruelty is almost unimaginable. A young cow was placed in a pen with her head locked in a cage-like device with 6 bulls who continued to mount her for hours until her legs were broken and until she died. One former staff member described a horrific situation in which a scientist was trying to euthanize a pig in order to extract lung tissue, and the pig didn't die. And so as the pig continued to gag and thrash, he said the scientist, quote, seemed to be getting some kind of enjoyment out of this thing, talking and shouting at the animal, "How do you like that, pig?" Stuff like that. The whole process was shocking. The center is staffed with 44 scientists and other support staff. These people don't have medical degrees yet are allowed to perform major surgery on the animals. When one staff member was questioned about allowing staff members to perform major surgery on animals, he replied, and this is a quote, "A vet has no business coming in and telling you how to do it. Surgery is an art you get through practice." Really? What would you think about people just learning how to operate, humans learning how to operate on humans, other humans, by just practicing it? Ask your neighbor to come over and practice taking your appendix out on your kitchen table. I mean, it's just shocking. For years, veterinarians have been writing to the center staff and to government officials about the deplorable conditions and cruelty at the center. And there were copies of correspondence in the Times article. But nothing has changed. In fact, the Times reporter talked to several people who described continuing barbaric practices and ongoing efforts to cover up, which included changing records. Center staff members have repeatedly defended their actions, saying that a lot of it was due to budgetary restrictions. Really? Changing records? You do that because your budget is low? Those who try to do something about the situation are promptly quieted. Dr. Keene, for example, was told he was no longer allowed in the complex after he escorted a reporter inside the building. Many, if not most, of the center's projects have ended in failure. For example, an attempt to breed cows to have twins and triplets resulted in a 400% increase in the death rate of single calf births. In spite of this, the center continued the experiments using strategies to address the complications, which almost failed. This went on for 30 years. When activists started paying attention to the center's activities, the center director actually cited, and this is hard to imagine, the Bible as justification. According to Genesis, the guy said, man is supposed to have dominion over animals, which apparently this director interprets as permission to abuse them. He suggested that he and his employees are perfectly capable of policing themselves. Not doing such a great job by my observation. There's been no consistent effort for anybody to do anything about it. The USDA has done nothing, cites the center's exemption from the Animal Welfare Act. The USDA does require that the center have a review committee charged with reviewing experiments for animal safety. But when the center was asked for the minutes of the review committee's meetings for the last 10 years, it provided 6 sentences from one session. The center admitted that the committee doesn't really review experiments. Instead, the staff approves its own work. And that's almost unbelievable. The Times looked at 850 experiments that were done since 1985 and found that most decisions were made by 6 or fewer staff members, and usually the group included the researchers involved. In other words, they're approving their own work. The logistics were discussed, not safety or cruelty. The descriptions of the protocols say it all. The words profit and production efficiency appear 111 times, pain only 2 times. While university officials who reviewed the protocols were largely appalled, USDA officials say that the center's approval process meets its requirement. While center spokespersons continue to insist that their research is valuable to farmers and the public, the center's activities show otherwise. Just last year, The center conducted studies that involved giving cows a growth stimulant called Zomax several months after Merck, the drug's maker, voluntarily withdrew the drug from the market due to complications. Now, drug makers rarely volunteer to take drugs off the market, which really can tell you how bad the side effects of this one must be. The fact that this abominable place is still in business is hard to believe. The fact that we as taxpayers are paying for it infuriates me. And the fact that the United States Department of Agriculture this is now on the list of the awful stuff that it does, ongoing awful activities that destroy the health of Americans, encouraging people to eat animal food and cheese. I am just, I hope my anger is coming through in this video clip. So anyway, let's start screaming and hollering about this. Somebody needs to shut this place down. And certainly, I don't want my money paying for it. Well, that's all for now. On that not so positive note, that's it for the week. Please pass this on to people who you think should be watching this and know about this situation. And I'll be back to you again next Tuesday with more news.